you ready to boost your confidence when selling so you're able to close more deals? Nikki Rausch will show you how to build a foundation of skills and a mindset that creates sales success without feeling pushy or salesy and without fear of rejection. She is a sales strategist and coach with more than 25 years of sales experience and is master certified in neuro-linguistic programming. This is a radically different approach to selling. It's a no sleaze, no slime, and no stress approach to building your business. This is Sales Maven. Here's Nikki.
Welcome to the Sales Maven podcast. I'm your host, Nikki Rausch. I'm here to offer you tips, techniques, and strategies to master your sales conversations. Today's episode is just you and me, and we're going to be talking about how to stop negatively impacting your sales goals. Now, before I do that, I just want to do a quick shout out as a thank you for those of you who continue to leave really beautiful, really sweet reviews on the podcast. If you haven't yet rated and reviewed the podcast, please do. And those of you who have, thank you so much. I am incredibly touched every single time I read a new review or hear from you as a listener, or especially when I get to hear for those of you who are implementing things that you're getting out of the podcast. It is a true honor that I get to go on walks with you, that I get to hang out when you're folding laundry, and all the things that you do when you're listening to the podcast. It's a real thrill. So thank you for that. Okay, so there's two things that I'm going to address today that are negatively impacting people's sales goals. And the idea behind this episode came from, like everything in my life, from whatever's going on. So in this particular case, there has been a pattern that I have seen with some of the people that I get the honor to coach with. Some of them are Sales Maven Society members. Some of them are private coaching clients. And I just thought, gosh, when something comes up over and over again, I always think, I need to do a podcast episode about this, because maybe there's somebody who I have not yet had the privilege of coaching and offering this kind of mindset shift to. So I'm bringing it to you today in case either of these two different scenarios resonate with you. And of course, I'm going to give you the what to do instead, because I think that's always important. Not just the negative, but what can you do to make it better? So the first thing is, now bear with me as I explain this, especially if you're like, oh my gosh, she's talking to me. Sometimes I'm talking to myself in these episodes, is anticipating what the other person is thinking and or is doing. This is such a negative way to impact your sales goals. And so I'm going to give you some scenarios to see if this resonates with you. But when you send something out, you've had a great call with somebody, they've shown some interest, they've asked you to put together a proposal, or they've said they want to review some information about working with you, and you send something out and you don't hear back right away. Are you starting to go into this mode of anticipating, oh my gosh, they didn't like the price, so now I should send something, or I should explain to them why my price is the way it is, or they didn't like something about my proposal because I haven't heard anything back, so I need to take some action, I need to do something different. This anticipating of what you think somebody is thinking and or is doing is so detrimental to your credibility and frankly, to your overall sales mindset, because you start to come up with stories, and most of these are fables. There's no truth to them. And I get this question a lot in the Sales Maven Society from different members, where they'll say, oh, I haven't heard back from this person. I'm worried that they are, upset about the pricing that I sent, and I feel like I need to offer them like a less expensive option, or I need to offer them some kind of other option, or I need to explain my price. And it's like, wait a minute, they haven't even responded. You have no idea what they're thinking or what they're doing. And if you send something now, you're starting to like really chip away at your credibility, because that person may have just gotten busy. Maybe they went on vacation. Maybe they missed your email. It got stuck in spam. Like, you don't know. So you got to knock it off. Like, you got to ask questions instead of telling people what you think they're thinking. or trying to, this is, I know I've talked about this before on the podcast, like the most detrimental thing that salespeople do is we project our limiting beliefs onto other people. Oh, this person will never pay this price for my service, or this person thinks I'm too expensive. So that's your limiting belief. And then you act as if that you can mind read, right? You're like, I know what they're thinking. They're thinking this. So because they're thinking this, I need to do that. Knock it off. You're not a mind reader. Unless people are paying you money specifically for mind reading, knock it off. It's so detrimental to your credibility when you send a message that is trying to anticipate what somebody is thinking or doing. And if you haven't just asked the question, I don't know. Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody? And maybe this is you. And if it is, I mean this with a lot of love, but that every time you go to say something, they try to like answer before you. It's like, so I was thinking that we should go, and they go, see a movie. And you're like, no, I was thinking we should go get something to eat. Oh, or you say, so I had this idea the other day, and they're like, I know. I didn't empty the dishwasher, and you want to make a list about whose turn it is. It's like, no, I was thinking that we should plan our next vacation. Like, have you ever had a relationship like that where the person is always making some anticipation about what you're going to say, but they're never right? And it's super annoying. And as a matter of fact, like relationships can end over this. Friendships, like romantic relationships can end over this. So can client relationships. So stop trying to anticipate what people are going to do or say, and ask them a question instead. Okay. Super, super important. When you can just send a message that says, hey, just wanted to check in and make sure that you did get the email that I sent you. What questions have come to mind so far? That's different than you trying to anticipate and trying to like do something or take some action, which really muddies the waters. I'm not a fan of muddying the waters. I'm sure I've given this analogy probably on the podcast. I know I've given it probably 1,000 times since I started my business, but imagine that somebody gives you something, like maybe you're really thirsty and they give you like the perfect thing for you to quench your thirst. It's the perfect temperature. It's in the perfect vessel. You're so excited and you're so thirsty and you can't wait to take a drink. And just as you take it, like coming towards your mouth to take that like delicious first sip, somebody walks by and just flicks in a little clump of dirt. Ew, who wants to drink it now? That's what you're doing every single time you do this anticipation thing. You're muddying the waters. And it's just like, it just breaks down that rapport, breaks down the credibility, breaks down your authority. Like, really knock it off. And instead just ask a question and see what the other person says. And if they still ignore you, then, there's some other actions that you can take if they really truly are ghosting you. But that should never be your second message to them. You send an email that's got your proposal. Well, frankly, you should already have your circle back call scheduled. But if you don't, and you don't know when you're going to talk next, do not try to anticipate what they're thinking or doing. Ask them instead and see what they say. I know this came up recently in the group in the Sales Maven Society. And I said to the person, like, this is what I would suggest. Like, they gave me their message. I tweaked it. This is what I would suggest that you send. And they came back like, I think within 24 hours and said, oh, the person is ready to move forward. I'm so glad that I sent the message that I tweaked for them versus the message they were going to tweak, because they would have actually cost themselves business or actually like cost themselves revenue. So be careful, because this is how you negatively impact your sales goals. Okay. So in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, we learn about enmeshment. I don't know if you know that term, enmeshment, but it's essentially where we get enmeshed in another person's experience. And when we do this, it can, this causes like codependency, And we have these relationships in our life. Some of them are in our personal life. But when you get enmeshed into your client or your prospect's response to something, it can be really damaging to the relationship. And I think about this story that my NLP teacher used to always tell in different groups. Like every time she would teach a new group and I was assisting in that course, I would always hear her tell this story. And the story, I don't know if I've actually ever told this on the podcast before. So please forgive me if I have, and hopefully you'll find it interesting if you haven't heard it before, or maybe you'll like to hear it again, because I never tell the same story twice. There's always some new detail or some little tweak, right? Because that's the way your brain works. But this particular story was about these two horses. This is actually a true story. And there were two horses. They were born right around the same time. So they were foals. I think that's what you call a baby horse, a foal. And, they played in the same pasture together, and they grew up together, and they were really close. They kind of ate together, and they kind of hung out in the pasture together, and they just kind of did everything together. These two horses, they were very, very close. And at one point, the rancher that owned these two horses was taking them to a show. So he loaded them up in the horse trailer and, pulling it in his big truck. And as he was driving down the highway, there was an accident, and he was a part of it, and the horses were as well. And it actually flipped the horse trailer on its side. And of course, everybody was very concerned. The people were okay, but people were very concerned about the horses. And when the trailer flipped on its side, one horse landed on top of the other. And they could, what they could see and what they could get into the horse trailer, they could tell that the horse that was on the bottom was hurt quite bad, but they couldn't get the horse that was on the top of the other horse to move to get treatment to the horse that was on the bottom. They couldn't see any damage. They couldn't see any injuries to the horse that was on the top, but they couldn't get the horse to move. And they ended up, I guess, wherever they were at the time, they ended up calling in, there was an expert, like a horse trainer that lived close by to where the accident was. And somebody who was there said, I know this trainer, let's call this person, let's get them over here, see if they can help in any way so that we can, treat this horse. And so when the trainer came and looked and saw the two horses, one on top of the other, the trainer took out one of those, like the horse, I think it's called a horse whip. It's that long like whip, and it's got that little tiny piece of, I think it's leather on the end. You can tell I'm not a horse person. All of you who are like horse people, equestrian, I think is the name. You're probably like, oh, Nikki, so you should have looked this up before you started telling this story. So anyway, she, I think it was the trainer takes this whip and starts to trace along the horse that's on the top, starts at the nose of the horse and goes all the way up, through the head and all the way down the back and, under the legs and then comes up through the tummy. And then at one point and is just tracing with this whip, like just light touch along the top of the horse. And when it comes back up and gets to where it originally started, the horse on the top jumps up. And what they figured was that the horse that was on the top was so enmeshed in the horse that was on the bottom that it didn't know where it stopped and the other horse began, because they were so close, they were so enmeshed that it thought it was hurt. But as soon as this trainer showed and let it feel the difference between itself and the other horse, they were able to get the top horse off and then treat the horse that was on the bottom in the accident. So I think about this story all the time, and I think about it in a lot of different areas of my life. And I hope that it's helpful as I tell it in the podcast today, this idea of being enmeshed. Are you enmeshing yourself, I don't know if that's the right term, in your clients or in your prospects' response? Do you not know where you stop and they begin. And when you are trying to anticipate what they're thinking, what they're going to say, what they're going to do, that's you being overly attached. That's you being enmeshed in them. And again, I mean this with a lot of love, but it's just not your business. You know, you have to have some separation. I know in my personal life, I can get very enmeshed in other people's stuff. It's a work in progress. I'm still a work in progress with it. But I actually do this little thing that I learned from my NLP teacher where I will take both of my hands and I'll pat like my chest, my stomach, my legs, and I'll say, this is me. And I'll pat, pat, pat. This is me. This is me. And then I'll push my hands away and I'll imagine the other person in the situation and I'll go, that's them. Pat, pat, pat. I'm not actually patting them, but in the privacy of my own mind, I am. They're there. And I'm going, this is me. That's them. This is me. That's them. And it's a way to kind of get separated. Like I'm the type of person, especially in my younger years, before I learned neurolinguistic programming, I could hear a story about somebody, something that happened in their life, something that was traumatic, and it would make me sick to my stomach. Like I would get these intense stomach aches because I was so enmeshed in other people's experiences and their life. And it just really was very detrimental. And yet I see this all the time now, probably because I can be so guilty of it, but I see it a lot in sales of my own clients getting enmeshed in other people's business, how that person's responding to them, what they're going to say, what they mean, what they do, all of those things. It can be really detrimental to your like physical and mental well-being, frankly. And of course, it impacts your sales goals when you start making concessions when somebody didn't even ask for concessions. So again, knock it off. There's no reason to do it. Okay. So that's the first thing, a way that's negatively impacting people's sales goals. And then the second one I wanted to bring up, which still goes back to this, mindset. Doesn't everything, feels like most things in life go back to mindset, has to do with when somebody gives you a harsh no and what happens. There will be people who will decline your offer and you'll be totally fine with them declining. And then there will be these unique incidents where somebody will choose to decline, but in a really harsh way. And I had this happen with a client not too long ago where she had presented an offer to somebody who had shown interest. So it wasn't a totally cold lead. The person had shown some interest and she knew this person really well. The person had shown interest. She presented the offer. They had a circle back call scheduled. They got on the circle back call and the person didn't just say, thank you, no, thank you. The person proceeded to give a pretty harsh no. And my client took it. It was like, it really derailed her. And for a few days, like made it so she was like, I didn't, for a few days, Nikki, I wasn't even comfortable like talking about my offer anymore. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just felt really bad about it. And when we dug into like really what happened and what was going on, there were a few things that was really impacting her. So one is everything that she was describing to me. I kept getting this visual in my head of like a sponge. And I was like, I keep hearing you tell this story and every little bit of it, it's like you've become a sponge. Cause she was saying like, it's totally like, I don't care about, yes, I care about her, but her opinion about it, I'm not really somebody who gets caught up in other people's opinions. So I'm fine that she didn't really like it, but it was like I took on this opinion and it became my own judgment of myself. And I was like, yeah, I just see this sponge. It's like you're soaking up into your skin what somebody else is saying. And then you're like letting it absorb into your skin. And then pretty soon it's like how you're judging yourself. And it's not helpful. These are those moments where you got to be Teflon. Now, let's talk about this. Like, let's talk about when people give you a harsh no to your offer. One, if you can take a step back and say, one, are people saying yes to it? And in this particular case with my client, people are definitely saying yes to her offer. So we already know it's a viable offer. Did you do anything differently with this person and the way you presented it versus the other people that said yes? So in this case, it was no, there was no difference. Okay. So we know that people have liked how you've presented it before because you've gotten yeses before. So that's some clues there. And then the next thing was, do you feel like there's anything you should have or could have done differently to like present it in a way that would be more appeasing to her, that she didn't feel so that she had to come back at you so hard? And when we really dug into it, the answer was no. Like, there really wasn't anything that she could have or would have done differently. So in that particular case, even though she's being a sponge right now and she's taking this other person's really harsh no, and she's absorbing it into her skin and making it a judgment about herself. Somehow she's not worthy. She shouldn't be presenting this to people, all this like negative stuff that we can sometimes take on. So you also have to give people a little bit of grace in this moment, that it can be really hard sometimes for people to say no. And sometimes when people have to say no, they get defensive. And she was like, yeah, I think maybe that is a little bit of her personality. Okay, so if you're interacting with somebody and you have a prospect or a client, or maybe it's somebody that you do know, a lot of times this particular thing, when you take on this kind of like, you start to be a sponge, it's because you know that person, they know you. So all of a sudden, like, you start judging yourself because they're being the way they are. So you're like, what's wrong with me? All of that. But realistically, if somebody has a hard time saying no, and it brings out their like defensiveness to have to say no, like they feel bad. So they almost have really bad behavior as a result of it. And I think that's what was happening here. I mean, obviously I wasn't a part of the conversation, but I would challenge you that when you have these situations in your own business, in your own experiences with people, if you can take a step back and go, hey, what would I have done or said differently? And if there's nothing that's really popping out to you, and you have gotten yeses from other people using the same strategy or the same language or, the same conversation and presenting it in the same way, then it's okay to just say like, oh, maybe this person, it was hard for them to say no and it brought out their defensive side. It's not their best side, but I'll give them some grace, and I won't take this on as self-judgment. I will not be a sponge with this person. I will be Teflon. And sometimes it's okay to say to people, I know I've done an episode about, criticism and, how to respond to criticism, that sometimes you just say to somebody, thank you for sharing your opinion in regards to my offer. I appreciate you taking the time to let me know what you think. That's all you need to say. You don't have to say, oh gosh, I'm so sorry that you were offended by it. Or, oh my gosh, you're right. Yes, I should never have gotten out and, how dare I enter the world and present offers and opportunities to people. Gosh, what a horrible person I am. Like, no, you don't have to say any of that. And you also don't ever have to say, I agree. Thank you for your opinion. That's pretty much all you need to say to just about anybody when you want to keep the relationship intact and you don't agree with whatever or however they're coming at you. Because if you take this in, like what my client did for a couple of days, and she was like, I just wasn't even comfortable picking up the phone. It's like, well, yeah, who would be? When you're being a sponge, when you're absorbing all this negative stuff and you're turning it into self-judgment, negative self-talk, all the stuff that we all do. So nothing wrong with my client. She's like everybody else. I have those moments too. You probably do as well. So it's okay. Let's give ourselves some grace too, and be prepared for these moments. Have this little like phrase in your back pocket, which is what I wanted to give to you today, is thank you for sharing your opinion. And you could say it as like the way I just said it with my voice. Thank you for sharing your opinion. I'm not being sassy. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not being rude. I'm not being dismissive. Thank you for sharing your opinion. I even have a little smile in my voice when I say it, so that again, it's like, this is me. That's you. Now, I don't do that in front of anybody. So if you ever see me making this weird hand gesture, when I'm talking to myself privately, if I don't think people are watching me, you might actually see me do this, because I'm really serious about I'm not going to take on other people's stuff if I can help it. I can't always, sometimes I miss the mark, but when I can really help it and get some distance, this is what allows for me to continue to put out that next offer, put that next email out, or whatever the thing is, put myself in that next, position to be a speaker at an event, or whatever it is that you're doing. Stop taking on other people's stuff. Okay. So the gist of today's podcast, stop anticipating what people are going to say or do, and stop taking on, stop being a sponge to other people's, feedback, especially when it comes out as harsh feedback, something triggered their defensiveness. I think usually when people are being harsh, it's usually as a result of being defensive. They feel like that's their way to justify their no, or I don't know. It could be a lot of things. I could go into a whole nother topic about NLP and calibrated loops and all the things that happen, but we won't for the sake of the podcast. But there's a lot of things that can happen with people, but you don't have to be the sponge. You don't have to take it on. Okay, so I hope this episode was helpful and useful, and that you continue to let go of these things, because all they do is negatively impact your sales goals. And I want you to be positively impacting your sales goals with you feeling really confident, you standing in your place of credibility, allowing people to have their response, allowing people to have their opinions, and you keep going, because you are making an impact in the world, and people need what it is that you do. They need you to solve problems, offer solutions. That's why you do what you do, I suspect. I hope. All right. Thank you for listening today. I really, really appreciate it. Now, if you've been listening this year of 2022, it is the year of connection. So I'm trying to share some of my favorite connections with you. There's so many. Some of these people have been featured on the podcast already, but the one that I wanted to share with you today is my client and friend, Kai Roberts-Fu of Magnus Media Group. She is the production manager, video editor, and writer for Magnus Media Group. Kai has been featured on the podcast before. As a matter of fact, she was on episode 52, which was called Get Deliverables Quickly and Get Paid Sooner. And I wanted to share about what Kai does. Kai and her husband own Magnus Media Group, and they help people transform one-dimensional ideas into the multi-layered medium of video. And clients hire them for a variety of video projects. So if you need an About Us video, if you need a speaker demo, if you have an event going on and you need somebody to come and do event highlights for your event, fundraising videos, they do full-length lecture production, they do product demos, they also do legacy videos for organizations and individuals. Her work is stellar. She's worked with a few of my clients. I always hear really great things about her. And I just know her as a person, and she's lovely. And her husband too. I've gotten the privilege of working with both of them in some capacity, and they're just so knowledgeable and they're so good at what they do. So if you need some help with video, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you go and check them out. And the easiest way is to go to their website, which is Magnus, Magnus mediavideo.com, magnusmediavideo.com. So check them out. All right. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Hey, if I can support you on your own sales journey, if you're ready to show up and really amplify your sales and do it with kindness, do it with confidence, come join the Sales Maven Society. That's where you're going to get some coaching from me. You're going to get access to an amazing group. So if you want some groups to network with, hey, my people are amazing. And I don't just mean because they're my people. I mean, That group is so cool. There are so many neat people in there doing amazing things. Come hang out with us. Come learn some sales skills and really amplify your business. You can join the Sales Maven Society by going to salesmavensociety.com/ no, that's not what I meant to say. You can come and join by going to salesmavensociety.com. And if you enter coupon code 47trial, it'll take $100 off your first month of membership. You can come hang out with us for a month. Come to the live call, see what happens there. You might be surprised. People are often surprised at how much they get out of the coaching calls each month. So we'd love to have you come hang out with us. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for rating and reviewing the podcast. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for listening to Sales Maven. Visit us online at yoursalesmaven.com/maven for more resources to boost your confidence and skills.